أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم مؤمنين مؤمنات, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. We've gone through Tawheed, proving the existence of Allah. We went through some of His qualities, including justice, adl or adala. And we proved that Allah must be just and cannot be unjust and cannot do any injustice. We then said that this just one God that we've proven, this just Creator, must give us guidance, must give us hidayah, and send someone down that we can recognize as being sent down from Him. What comes after Tawheed, Adl, and Nubuwah is naturally, from our school of thought, we talk about Imama, or sometimes they describe it as Wilaya. And we had said yesterday that because this is the final evening, and because Wilaya and Imama is discussed so often in our communities, it won't be so beneficial for us. Well, it has maybe some benefits, but for our purposes, we wanted to go to the next, which is Ma'ad. What we've been trying to do over these past 2 weeks is to go through rational proofs for our usul ad-din, our fundamental belief system, to see if our beliefs actually stack up against what people claim nowadays to use in order to derive truth. They're saying that you use the intellect, use rationality, use evidence, and we've been doing this for proving the existence of God, for proving His justice, for proving and how you recognize His representatives, the ones who receive revelation from Him. And now the question is, what happens afterwards? Is there actually an afterlife or not? So this is the final question we're going to answer tonight, inshallah. So a few things, we're going to go through some definitions first, and then we'll move on to answer the questions. Now normally when people discuss our usul ad-din, sometimes they talk about it as Tawheed, Adl, Nubuwah, Imama, and Qiyamah. Now the issue with that is Qiyamah it's short for Yawm al-Qiyamah, right? The Day of Judgment. That's not actually the asl, that's not actually the point that we're trying to prove. The Day of Judgment is one part of the afterlife, but it's not the whole afterlife, right? After a person passes away, right, that intiqal, that going on to the next dimension, they move on into the grave, then move on into barzakh, and then move on finally to the afterlife where they would end up on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment. So this whole episode after death we refer to as Ma'ad, right? As coming back, the place where you're returning. So Yawm al-Qiyamah is one part of it, not the whole thing. So in essence it should be Tawheed, Adl, Nubuwah, Imama, and Ma'ad, not Qiyamah. And if we were to translate it, we would just say Ma'ad is the hereafter or the afterlife. Meaning we're trying to answer the question, what happens after we die? Now death itself is obviously not up for debate. There is no person, no scientist, no skeptic, no atheist, no individual on earth denies death, right? They say two things you can't deny. Two things are inevitable, death and taxes. You can't avoid these two things. Now the debate is what happens afterwards. What happens after death? Some atheists, skeptics, empiricists, materialists, they say because we're just material beings, because we have no proof of the soul, we have no proof of immaterial life, all we see here is what you see is what you get. Once you die, that's it. You go into nothingness, non-existence. You're just a corpse in the ground, right? There's nothing left of us. For those individuals, life and death become opposites, right? You're here, you're alive, and then after you die, that's it. You go into non-existence. So you have life on one hand, and then non-existence on the other. Life in this world, after you're born, you have life. After you die, you have nothing. You're no longer there. You non-exist. So this is obviously the minority opinion among people throughout the world. Now sometimes when we want to come and defend our beliefs, we get very reactionary and very defensive, right? But we should remember that people who believe in the afterlife are in the majority right now, even among scientists. Scientists or strict empiricists, these individuals are actually believing individuals. Now, the people who get the spotlight, like your Dr. Stephen Hawking, your Richard Dawkins, your Christopher Hitchens, all these famous atheists, neo-atheists, Islamophobes, etc., they're in the minority, even in their own communities. In the scientific community, they don't have the majority opinion. So for them to make such claims, they need to offer very, very strong evidence. So what we have to say is we have to break down our discussion in kind of two areas. I mean, the first thing we have to tell them is that you have to offer up evidence for why there is no life after death. If the majority has made a claim, and it's basically been proven throughout time, if somebody wants to then refute that claim, they should have some sort of evidence for that. Now, there's two ways for us to prove it. Obviously, based on what we've discussed previously, we have Tawheed, Adl, Nubuwa, and technically Imam or Wilaya. We have the Quran with us. We have a Hadith. We can use these things to prove the afterlife, and it will be very easy. Now, we said we wanted to try to stay away from using Quran and Hadith when, if we can, because we're trying to make rational proofs. So, but just so we understand, we're going to go through a proof based on this idea that Allah's justice necessitates something else happening. That'll be our first discussion. After that, then what we'll say is there something rational that we can prove about the afterlife? And then, moving on from there, do we have some sort of scientific or empirical evidence that either proves or at least leads us to believe that there should be an afterlife? Right? This will be our discussion tonight. If you can send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If you remember, after we had proved Tawheed, we had gone on to Adl, we had mentioned this reminder. We said, if somebody now wants to understand these points going forward, you have to make sure every single muqaddama, every single preliminary point was understood without doubt, right? Sometimes atheists, they'll kind of jump to step 10 without understanding steps 1 through 9, right? If you're trying to have a discussion and trying to prove the existence of God, they come out of nowhere and they say, well, even if God exists, he can't be good. I said, okay, hold on, we can get there, but let's prove that he exists first, that there is some creator. After we prove that we prove that there's a creator, someone who exists that's created everything over here, then we can start figuring out what his characteristics and sifat are. But you can't, before proving something, all of a sudden jump to its characteristics. This doesn't make any sense, right? We gave the example of somebody in mathematics. You can't disprove algebra or argue about algebra until you have accepted the idea of numbers in and of themselves, right? If you accept the idea of concrete numbers, right? A number line, real numbers, then you can start going forward and talking about algebra. But if somebody were to talk about algebra being useless or calculus being useless, say, hold on, do you accept that numbers exist or not? That mathematics is a real science or not? If you do, now we can use those basic ideas and then we can move on to higher mathematical sciences like algebra, like calculus, etc. Same thing here. We've already proven Allah's justice, His adl, His adala. So now, based on that, and if you remember, we talked about justice in this world and the next world. That same style of proof is offered for this discussion as well. So we said that Allah cannot allow injustice to take place. He does not do any injustice. But we said, okay, but we see injustice taking place in the world. So how does this work out? We know that Allah is all-wise. We've proven this. We said that a wise person has a goal in mind whenever they do anything, right? If somebody, for example, were to just create a building, like put a building up and have absolutely no purpose for it, you'd say, that's a dumb thing to do. It's unwise. What are you making the building for? What's your end goal? If they said nothing, say, doesn't seem like it makes any sense. You wouldn't call that a wise individual. Wisdom is whenever you embark on an action, whatever you want to do something, you have the goal, you have your end goal set up ahead of time. And everything that you do, a wise person will make sure every single step that they go forward and take will reach that goal. So, Allah says, there is no injustice. I cannot do any injustice. But we see it in this world. So, if He's created this world for justice, He can't do injustice, and He's wise, then this injustice we see in the world, how is that supposed to be answered? How do we hear the reply for that? Where do we see the effects of this injustice and justice take place? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If, after having proven Allah exists, after understanding that He's all-wise, that He can't do injustice, if somebody were to say, okay, but there's no hereafter, they cut that off and say, when you die, that's it, it's over. Then what would happen is you would be left with injustice in the world. And you'd be able to, na'udhu billah, accuse Allah of being unjust. Why? As we said, we see individuals in this world who have caused chaos and fasad, murderers, criminals, right? Who have gone against Allah's wishes, who have moved away from Allah's message, who have tried to destroy individuals, who have tried to improve mankind and lead them towards salvation. These individuals have destroyed everything that Allah has tried to set up. In doing so, sometimes they die and they're never punished. We said they live very nice lives, right? Sometimes they live in palaces, right? We can talk about Yazid or Muawiyah or Saddam or Hitler. They lived good lives. They enjoyed their lives. They had money, they had wealth, they had power. They enjoyed everything that a person whatever a person wants in this world, they got. They received. Somebody might say that's unjust. If you remember what we said is, yes, if you cut it off at that point, if you cut it off at death and there's nothing less, nothing afterwards, then yes, bad happens to good people and good happens to bad people. And that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work in line with Allah's justice. But if now there is another place where things are answered, if there's another world where you see effects, if there's another dimension, another place where justice can manifest and take realization and come about, then we can understand this form of justice. So Allah's justice itself, His wisdom itself necessitates some other place where things have to get paid back. If you remember, we talked about how there's this spiritual energy, right? These spiritual reverberations. Right? There's positive actions and negative actions. How is it that a person can commit a positive action, they can do something positive that has positive energy, but not receive the reward for that in this world? It has to show up somewhere, right? We talked about cause and effect. Vice versa, on the other hand, if somebody does something negative, right? They plant a negative seed, for example, they need to see that negative tree grow. Where is it going to grow? If it doesn't grow here, it needs to grow in the next life. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, on one hand, we see tyrants, zalimeen, oppressors, criminals. They don't receive their due justice in this world, so they receive their punishment in the next. On the other hand, you see individuals like our prophets, our imams, the ashab, our ulama, urafa, the awliya, all these individuals who have done nothing but give their lives up for the message of Islam, done nothing but good works, right? For them, they live, materialistically speaking, if we're talking about in worldly things, they've lived pretty horrible lives, right? They've been oppressed and tortured and attacked, silenced. So where is the reward for what they've done? Where is the reward for the good that they've done? So we say, again, that's rewarded somewhere else. Now, this stuff we derive specifically from Allah's sifat, just from Him being just and wise. Is there a way that we can prove this through some sort of rational empirical idea? Can we now use some basis in science, in empirical research, in medical science, that at least points us toward that there must be something afterwards? That's the next question we have to try to answer. If you can send a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We said there's two different types of laws. We said one is these rational laws that are available in our world, right? These rational laws, we talked about logic, I think maybe the first or second night. So that's how we're going to prove everything, right? If you understand logic, you make a premise, make another premise, you get a conclusion. If A is B and B is C, then A is C. These are rational, logical principles. These are rules, and they don't break ever. If they ever broke, then science couldn't exist, right? You couldn't make any conclusions, you couldn't make any statements, you could never prove anything. A scientist needs rationality to be there. Now our question, of course, to them is, okay, well, where is rationality? You can't experiment on it, you can't point to it. So it's already something that's immaterial. This is already showing us that there's something beyond the physical world. But again, that's not the main point of our discussion, just to show that a scientist, an empiricist, a materialist, they cannot deny that there's something beyond the physical, because they need immaterial in order to prove their own sciences. So these rational laws are in place. We have the science of mantiq, we have the science of logic. So go back to what we had said about planting things. So now, if these rational laws are there, we say that if somebody plants something good, what has to be the result? Let's give the physical example. We had mentioned the example, if somebody plants an apple seed, what has to be the result? An apple tree. If they plant an orange seed, it has to be an orange tree. The physical laws, physical causality, material causality, cause and effect has to work out like this. There is no chaos in this world. There is no observable chaos. When you have a cause, you get that B result. Whenever you plant the apple seed, you get the apple tree, nothing else. There is no other option. Again, according to empirical science. So then we say rationally, if someone plants a good deed, then what must be the result? It has to be a good tree. If someone plants a bad deed, then there must be some sort of bad tree that's going to be grown. So when we say that if someone gives off this positive energy or negative energy, where does that tree grow? If it doesn't grow here, there has to be some place that it grows. So some may answer and say, okay, it has its rational foundations, but it's not empirical enough yet. We need something a bit more scientific. So now we have to try to understand, is there something concretely in science that'll kind of strengthen these premises that we have mentioned? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Do you remember our discussion about the Big Bang? Where we said that some individuals were saying that, well, the Big Bang proves that there is no God. And we said, listen, scientists, those who have devised this theory of the Big Bang, themselves don't claim that the Big Bang is the start of the universe. In fact, they say when things break down, when you go back to Planck's moment, that initial singularity, they say everything before that, then there are no more laws. There's no science left because there's no more time, there's no more space. They can't measure anything. Mathematical equations break down. So science has no meaning before the Big Bang, before Planck's moment, before that singularity where they say everything, quote unquote, starts. So, okay, so then if it doesn't work before, then why will science work after? If we're trying to measure something which is immaterial, something which is not bound by the laws of science, well, how can a scientist come and say, I also now have jurisdiction to say what happens after death? Well, you don't have that jurisdiction. The same way you can't talk about before the Big Bang, you can't talk about after death. It's the same thing. Before the Big Bang is something immaterial, right? That's our claim. So science discusses only material things. Before the Big Bang is something immaterial, science can't say anything. After death, we're saying is immaterial, so then science can't offer anything as well. So if a scientist makes any claim about whether death or after death something happens, then they're not being a scientist anymore. They're just guessing, right? They're just giving their own assumptions. They're trying to be a philosopher, but obviously their philosophy is broken, because if they had understood philosophy, what did we just say? Philosophy is based on rational rules. Rational rules are not material. You're saying that there's something immaterial. So you have to use immaterial rules and immaterial laws. Okay? Let's say, okay, fine. Let's just assume we're going to stick with science, empiricism, materialism. No problem. Okay. Some say after you pass away, what the atheists say is after you die, that's it. You're all gone. And we say, no, our consciousness, our free will, our life, what we call life, you just thinking about yourself, your intention, your irada, all this continues on, right? Your soul continues to the next realm. That's what we say. So a scientist is going to come and answer back. An atheist will come back and say, no, there is no such thing as a soul in science. There's nothing that we've proven to say that this is a soul. All your thoughts, all your feelings, all your emotions, it's just electrical impulses, right? It's just your synapses connections, electricity being shot up and down between your nerves and all the connections in your mind and body. That's all it is. Okay, fine. Let's just say that's what it is. Let's take a step back. Remember, let's go back to this idea of an apple tree. We said you take, let's say, an apple seed, you plant it in the ground. This apple seed then grows into an apple tree. You can take any of those apples off, eat that apple, you have what? You have a seed left, which you can then plant again, right? And you can continue the cycle infinitely, right? It won't stop. Let's use an example of human beings. Humans start as what? Sperm, egg, zygote. They become a fetus. Then they grow into become babies, then to adults. Then they die in the ground, they decompose. When they decompose, they go into the earth. When they're in the earth, they become food for insects and worms and other animals. Then the plants will then eat that soil and those nutrients. Then some animal will come and eat that plant. Then that animal that ate that plant might be food for a human being. That food then gets transformed to proteins, which then becomes part of sperm or egg, which then becomes a human later on. See, just an infinite cycle continues. Right? Same as you had the apple seed, same thing. We have a human seed which continues on. So we ask empiricists, scientists, say, listen, don't you believe in two things, the law of conservation of mass and the law of conservation of energy? You say that mass, matter, cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. The same from the beginning exists till the end. Okay. Energy. What is energy? Energy is this mass or matter in motion. And that can't be created nor destroyed. The same amount that existed from the beginning will continue on forever. Okay? So you're saying thoughts are not physical. Thoughts are not immaterial. They're just electrical impulses. Fine. No problem. So when these electrical impulses are there, where do they go afterwards? Do they go into nothingness? Well, you've told me that energy can't go into nothingness. You can't destroy it. So where's that energy going to go? Where are these electrical impulses supposed to go? Now, what the form is afterwards, that's not the question. You're just saying that it goes from something to nothing. We're saying that you don't have that idea in your own scientific laws. You're saying that mass, matter can never become nothing. Energy can never become nothing. It will remain the same and simply change forms over and over and over again. We're saying, okay, if you want to believe that consciousness, thoughts, feelings is just energy or electricity or whatever, okay, then it can transform. It's never going to go into non-existence. If you say that, then you're breaking your own laws. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So one indication we can find in medical science for this is regarding EKGs or ECGs. So those of you who are in medical science, no, EKG is, if I'm not mistaken, electrocardiograms, right? So what is it? Now, again, I'm not a doctor, obviously. So basically, these sensors, these nodes are placed on the body, right? Around the body, around the area here. The heart, when it beats, gives off these electrical impulses. And again, anybody who, if I say something wrong, please feel free to correct me. There's no problem in that, right? I might be saying these things incorrectly. So the EKG basically is measuring these electrical discharges that come off. Your heart beats, it gives off these electrical discharges, it hits somebody's chest, and that's what those sensors that you place all over your body, that's what that system is measuring, those electrical impulses that come off. So then our question is this, that EKG, after it reads in the machine, does it just stop there? Or does it continually go off into the universe? It starts from the heart beats, it shoots out this electricity, this energy. It hits the chest, and it continues on. But where does it go? You can say it goes into another universe, fine. But you cannot say that it gets destroyed. You cannot say that it goes into non-existence, because that would break your own physical laws, your own laws that you've proven before. Memories, same thing. Memories, they say, is living information stored in our brains. Okay. Does it just vanish after our brain stops? If it just vanishes, then you said that this energy, these electrical impulses, are going to nothingness. But you've said that energy cannot be destroyed. Feelings, emotions, everything will apply to these same rules. Let me give you one statement here from Dr. Stuart Hammeroff. He's an anesthesiologist and a professor. So I'll give you the quote. It's only a few lines. It might be a little technical, but that's okay. So he says, let's say the heart stops beating. The blood stops flowing. The microtubules lose their quantum state. I forget these fancy words, it's not a big deal. But the quantum information, remember all that stuff that's stored inside of us, that quantum information, which is in these microtubules, is not destroyed. I'm quoting here. It cannot be destroyed. It just distributes and dissipates to the universe at large. Now this is basically a scientist giving his opinion, right? It's a doctor, anesthesiologist, a professor. They're saying that this stuff just goes out into the universe, that energy. Call it consciousness, call it your feelings, call it emotions, your memories, it doesn't matter. Any definition you want to apply, any type of thing that you would say that defines us as human beings, cannot be destroyed. So for somebody to claim that something is going to go to non-existence is going against their own law of conservation of mass or law of conservation of energy. So now, not just rationally, but scientifically, empirically, this statement of an atheist cannot hold. Now we have two other things we can bring as evidence. One is NDEs, the others are OBEs. And what are these? NDEs are near-death experiences. Now, of course, there are differences of opinion among medical scientists about what is death, right? For some, they say brain death. Some say it's when the heart stops. There's different definitions. If I'm not mistaken, now it's considered heart, not the brain, correct? I'm looking for the doctor. And there's got to be a doctor here. Come on, there's a room full of Muslims. One doctor. What is considered medical death? Brain death or heart death? Both? It's not both, because your brain can die. Well, okay, if you're not going to answer me, then just send a salawat. Really? We have no doctors here? Sorry? All engineers. Okay. Okay, so basically you're just going to have to do blind taqleed to me right now, right? So, what they say is brain death. Let's go with that one for now. Studies have shown that 18% of people experience memories and thoughts when they're brain dead. Their brains are completely shut off, medically speaking, but they still experience and have thoughts and have some emotion, have an experience. If you're supposed to go into nothingness after this, then there shouldn't be any experiences. That's one. Another example is going through these OBEs, which are out-of-body experiences. So many say that when a person has these out-of-body experiences, right, their heart stops, and the emergency room, they try the paddles, it doesn't work, and the person is basically medically dead for sometimes 1 minute, sometimes 5 minutes, 10 minutes, etc. What many studies have shown, and doctors have said this, is that though the person's medically dead, heart has stopped, but this person, after waking back up and coming back from the dead, so to speak, they say that, I saw things. I saw what you guys were doing. I saw that you were using paddles and everything, when they shouldn't have been able to do that. According to medical research, if they were dead, if they were nothing, there's no way they could have experienced what happened. Now, there's a lot of different evidence. I don't want to mention, because I think it gets too technical here. But for anybody who's interested, some individuals, especially those who are studying neurology and neuroscience, they've basically done experiments of people who have seizures, right? They connect these electrodes to a specific individual's brain, and they shock them to see what happens when you shock a person who has a seizure. And in one of these experiments, they noticed something in the back of the brain called the angular gyrus. They said from there, this is a place where language, space, your kind of left and right, your mathematics, right? Your self-awareness, this is what's stored in that part of the brain. So they say when they shock that individual, who basically is quote-unquote dead or shouldn't be experiencing things, they started having out-of-body experiences. So some of them are coming to these conclusions that maybe this is where consciousness lies. Obviously, we know that your soul doesn't just live in your brain or it doesn't live in your heart. You know, it's a bigger discussion in Islamic philosophy and irfan. The point is this. If somebody, as our conclusion, if somebody wants to come forward and claim scientifically that there is nothingness after death, they say then you have to throw away your laws that you've proven before. Your scientific laws of that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. Because it cannot be destroyed according to you. And your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, your consciousness, whatever those electrical impulses are, must continue on somewhere. Even if it goes on infinitely, fine. We'll start there. That's no problem. Now, of course, this is us trying to discuss the point without talking about Allah, without talking about His justice, without talking about the Quran, without talking about the Hadith. This is literally, if somebody doesn't want to discuss any of those and just wants to say, I want scientific, empirical, rational proofs for why there's a life after death. Say, okay, based on this, now I can't show you that there's an afterlife, but I can show you that you can't claim that there's nothingness. That's what we can do there. What we had said is the real way to offer these proofs is to start at the beginning. You must start at Tawheed and then work your way up, work your way down rather. After Tawheed, then start proving the sifat of Allah, start proving His attributes. From there is how you can rationally then prove Allah's the existence of the afterlife. If you try to do it this way, again, you can do ishara. You can indicate that there must be something, but you won't get any details. Same way that we talked about the Big Bang, or when we talked about the law and order and the teleological argument, right? The design that we see, it doesn't prove God, but it at least shows that something was here previously in order for this designed world to have happened. So science, does it disprove God? Absolutely not. And that's why the majority of scientists, it's because of their scientific research that they actually believe in Allah in the first place. They say that the way that the universe is ordered, the laws that we have seen, what we've seen in laboratories, shows us that there must be something beyond us. And then that's when they go and rationally prove this through the different books. So this is the way that we can try to move forward and offer these solutions to different individuals. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So this will end our discussion on Ma'ad. Now what we want to do basically is conclude the whole series that we've gone through for these past 12, 13 nights. And just recap what we've learned in kind of the tartib, the sayr, the methodology, and the chain of events that we've gone through. We started off saying that we are coming for these gatherings, these majalis, and we're trying to improve ourselves. We want to get better. We keep sinning. Why are we sinning? We say that Allah is telling us in the Quran, it's because we forget ourselves. We forget our identity. When you forget your identity, then you become a fasiq. Then it will be easier for you to sin. Once you start wanting to improve and establish establish your identity. How do you do that? We said one of the hadith mentioned, look for certainty in your deen. Look for certainty in your life. One of the ways to do that is through rational proofs. So we started proving everything one by one. We proved Allah's existence, justice, nubuwwah, and then we came to ma'ad, right? Afterlife. We talked about the miracles of the Quran. We talked about showing the Big Bang Theory. We talked about randomization. We talked about the relationship between science and Islam, or science and religion. So all of these things now, whenever you come to these shubahat, these issues, these criticisms, people who are attacking our faith or attacking religion in general, hopefully now with some of these points, you have this kind of iftikhar, this kind of pride. You've made your deen a bit more established and firm. So when this was not meant for us to go out and debate people. That wasn't the point of these lectures. The point was that we said at any time, any point that we sin, we're basically atheists. We're kuffar. We are a kafir, and we don't believe in Allah that moment that we sin. In that moment when we decide to sin, even though we had believed in Allah, we say, Allah, it doesn't matter what you say, I want to do what I want. I want to follow my own desires. With these rational proofs, now hopefully this sits in our mind. We can convince our hearts that whenever we come into these places, these moments, these choices, these crossroads in our lives, we can hopefully stop for a second and realize that, okay, I have no rational reason to do this. I have no rational, logical, reasonable reason, prerogative, and impetus to go against what Allah wants. Because He is the most obvious thing in existence. He is the most rational thing and reasonable thing to believe in. So now, how do the Ahlul Bayt give us advice to connect these two ideas to help us stop sinning? From Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam, we have a hadith which says, من أكثر من ذكر الآخرة قلت معصيته. Whoever remembers and does dhikr, increases their dhikr, their remembrance of the afterlife, of the next life, their ma'asiyah, their sins will start going down, start decreasing little by little. Now again, in order for you to remember the afterlife, if you can connect it back to all these rational proofs, then you have a whole usul al-din, you have a whole fundamental worldview and system available to you. This should be the way that you view the world. When we say that, we talked about isma. The reason the imams, they say that had the isma is because all of reality was available to them. When they saw some sin, when they saw something haram, when they saw something najis, they saw what it really was. They knew that this thing in reality is fire. This thing in reality is punishment. This thing in reality is negative energy. For us, when we see it, sometimes we forget what it is in reality. Right? When we're eating and we decide to overeat, right? What we're seeing is that, okay, my nafs, I want more food, but if we strengthen our identity, if we go through this and remember the akhirah, say, listen, this food right now might be good. I might feel good by taking a few more bites or making another plate. But in reality, I'll be eating hellfire. In reality, I'm just destroying myself. In reality, I'm adding to the amount of negative energy and punishment that I would get later on. So if we really understand these points and we have firm yaqeen in the next life and how we get to that next life and what we're supposed to do to ensure that our next life is one of sa'ada, of peace, of tranquility, and that we're with the Ahlul Bayt, is it okay? If we want to ensure that, then we remember all these usul ad-din. Now, one final point and then we'll end. We've been talking about rationality, about the intellect, and we've been kind of putting it up on a pedestal, right? Now, we're starting off at that point where we wanted to prove tawheed, adl, nubuwa, imama, ma'ad with the rational intellect. That's okay. But is that the be-all and is that the end-all? Is that the final place that we should be using? According to our urafah, no. Why? Because our intellects are limited. I'll mention just one point, inshallah. According to one of our mufassirin, when he does a tafsir of Surah Ikhlas, when they reach the verse, Lam yalid wa lam yulad. So typically, when we translate that, when you say Lam yalid, is what? Allah doesn't give birth, right? Wa lam yulad. That He was not born, right? There's no parent for Allah. Or the fancy English is, He was not begotten, right? That Shakespearean stuff. That's the literal translation that we read, and that's how most of us think about it. So when we read that and we understand that, we think about it in terms of, it's an answer to Christians, for example, right? That, no, Allah doesn't make, He's not a parent that gives birth to somebody, nor should God, na'udhu billah, be someone's child. That's what we typically think. So this mufassir, one of our philosophers in urafah, says there's a deeper meaning that we can understand as well. All these rational proofs that we've gone through, all these ideas, they stem from ideas in our own mind, right? When we talk about rational proofs, rational laws, A, B, C, D, all these things we were talking about. Where did this stuff come from? They were in our minds, right? These were thoughts. We put these thoughts together, and that's how we made a conclusion, right? So these thoughts are what? The result of our thinking, right? They're the thamara. They're the result, the fruit of our thinking. Or, in one sense, they're our awlad. They're your walad. They're something that's born from you. So this mufassir says that Allah says, وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. He can't be born of anything. That real Allah that the Ma'asumin alayhimus salam worshipped and understood was not one that was a rational Allah. Not one that you can understand by some rational intellectual proof. It's a first step that we have to go through, definitely. But they say, if you really want to get to Allah, your heart now has to accept Allah. This is where irfan comes in. This is where ma'rifatullah really comes in. After you understand Allah in the intellectual realm with rational proofs, now when you perform that, they say fana. Once you start performing this ibadah, when you start performing this tazkiyah, this tarbiyah, you improve yourself. You do islah, you reform your soul, then more and more your intellect in its rightful place takes a step down, and your heart, your soul begins to understand Allah in a different way. Right? In the same way, the love that we have for other individuals is not rationally explainable. In the same way, the ulama say that love that you should have for Allah, the way that you obey Him, shouldn't be because of some rational business transaction. Shouldn't be because A, B, B, C, A, C. It shouldn't be because of that. It should be because of nothing but pure love and adoration for Him. And inshallah, you can have some of the ulama come and join you and explain that more in depth. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So before we move on to the final musibah for our series, just wanted to extend my thanks to all the volunteers here, the board, everyone who has been attending all of the majalis, everyone who has offered their feedback, their questions, their comments, those who have asked questions and answers and started good discussions. Alhamdulillah, for me it was a beneficial experience, and I hope for all of you it was beneficial as well. And if you were able to derive some sort of benefit and learn anything from any of these lectures that we've discussed, then alhamdulillah, all khair is from Allah only. If there was any issues, and definitely there would be issues, mistakes, obviously my speed of speaking is something I know I have to work on, right? The way that I present my arguments might have been weak, and some have come for clarifications. There may have been things that I didn't explain properly. It was confusing. It was way out of this world, whatever. So for that, I apologize, and this is something that's on me. It's not anybody else's responsibility. And for anyone who wants to offer feedback on how I can improve, please inform me. My contact information can be gotten from any of the people on the board. If anybody needs anything, if there's any way that we can help while we're here for our remaining time, while we return back, inshallah, to Qum, we're at your service, inshallah. So again, I sincerely thank all of you, and I ask that you pray for the health and safety for all of our maraji, all of our ulama, all of the asatid in the Hawza Ilmiya, all the Hawzat, all of our schools, those who are dedicating their lives to make sure that us who are striving in the way of Ahlul Bayt, who are trying to follow the path of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, can take all this information, their life's research, and then we can share it with one another and then slowly improve. So again, I sincerely thank all of you, and inshallah we ask for your du'as for our health and safety. And for everybody's health and safety, please send a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if I'm not able to personally say khudafis or salam to you before I leave, then this is my khudafis and salam to you now. For many of us, the tragedy of Karbala has come to an end. Many people say, after that Sham-e Ghariban, that Laylatul Ghurba, that's when everything had stopped. The killing had ended, the martyrdoms had ended. But for the Ahlul Bayt, this is when the real tragedy begins. From here now, the message, the method, the medium changes. Before, Hussein gave and fought for Islam with his blood. He spread the message of Islam with his blood. And now Zainab and Imam Sajjad need to go spread Islam with their tongues. They are our media. This is the way that the Ummah learned about what happened. This is how the Ummah began to wake up and understand how could they have allowed this to happen to the family of Rasulullah. The shock of what had happened on the day of Ashura now began seeping into those who were present there. The children, the women, started to slowly understand what had just befell. What did they just witness on Yawm al-Ashura? On the night of Sham-e Ghariban, that Laylatul Ghurba, we're told that when the Yazidis came into the tents, when they began burning the tents, they were surprised to see that there was one man still alive. Someone asked,